So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Small intimate group here, but I'll be recording it and uploading it to my podcast channel. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We have some awesome guests on there. In fact, Anthony is a guest on my podcast. Become a billionaire with me. YouTube, iTunes, yeah. So here's a legal disclaimer, just, this isn't guaranteed that you're going to make money and become a billionaire. Just so you don't sue me if I say something and, blah, blah, blah. So how to purchase your first apartment complex. I am Multifamily Martin, and you've met my wife, Cindy. Here's a little bit about us. We've owned several companies. I started an online dating site. We started the first all-organic market here in Saratoga. I have my podcast. Been sailing since I was 5. Real estate investor. We've invested in over 4 states nationwide. And my wife Cindy, she's an engineer. She's also been a manager at a few tech startup companies. And she also manages our real estate portfolio. And on Friday, she just passed her real estate exam. So congratulations, yeah, super awesome, super excited. I just started a podcast, and obviously this is our first meetup. Why did I start this? For accountability, right? You go to other meetups, you meet a lot of people, but you have to take action, right? So I started the podcast and kind of explained why I started it, making my listeners hold me accountable. I wrote down, there's a podcast that I posted, I wrote down a list of goals with timelines. So my goal is to purchase a 2 to 30 unit apartment complex by July, so in 6 or 7 months. So clock's ticking. So I'm looking right now for off-market properties. If you guys hear of any in Northern California, Southern California, definitely keep me in mind. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. Become a billionaire with me. We're also on iTunes, Google Play, all that good stuff. So the power of real estate. I'll just tell you, a little story about how I got into it. About 5 years ago, we purchased our primary home. It needed some work. We had it rehabbed, and it just appraised for over $1.5 million. So with that being said, we pretty much built up $1 million in equity right now in our property. So we're sitting on a cash cow. So what can we do with that? Basically, I was able to take it to the bank and be like, hey, I have $1 million of equity in my property. I want access to that. So what do? They approve us for a HELOC. Then I'm able to take that HELOC money. It's pretty much like a credit card. You're able to invest it whatever way you want. That allowed us to invest in out-of-state portfolio, purchasing single-family homes, which in fact we recently sold. But it also allowed us to purchase single-family here in the Bay Area and do flips with that money. But with the market kind of doing this right now here in the Bay Area, we're moving our target. We're moving more towards the multifamily space. It's a little bit more stable, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's an example of one of our flips. This is a 7-day flip. As you can see here, old cabinets, old sink. We have these 1990s kind of fluorescent lights. Seven work days, not 7 days straight. 7 work days, because the thing that takes the longest is ordering cabinets. Ordering cabinets takes about 2 weeks. But 7 days we're able to install all waterproof flooring, baseboards, brand new cabinets, large island, double sink, move the refrigerator from the right side to the left side. About 40 LED lights, 7 days. So it's all about project management. Get in, get out. In this market, you can't hold too long, right? You don't know what the market's going to do, and each day you hold a flip, you lose money. So with the changing market, we kind of decided to move away from the single family and move into more the multifamily, because it's a little bit more safe, in my opinion. As you can see, you have one house that's renting for $800,000, If your tenant moves out, you're making nothing. And we've experienced this with our portfolio, and it hurts. When you're making nothing, your property management company has to go in, fix what the previous tenant broke, whether they put holes in the walls, broke something. So that takes them about a month. And then you have to find a tenant, you have to advertise it. So you could be out of a tenant for 3 to 6 months. That sucks. But with multifamily, when your unit is completely full, you're bringing in, for this fourplex, $3,200 in income. If one person moves out, you're still making $1,600. Even if a second person moves out, you're still making good money. Actually, I'm sorry, 2 people are out, so you're making $1,600. That's pretty good. So yeah, like I said, multifamily, in my opinion, is a lot less risky. For example, you have a 10-plex. If somebody moves out, you only have a 10%, unoccupied property. It's more stable. You're able to go in there, buy it, rehab it, increase the rent, by going into units and fixing them, or, charging for parking spots, or billing the tenants for utilities and whatnot. So here's just a quick rough example. Don't quote me on these numbers. But generally, if you raise, on a 288 unit complex, if you raise the rent by each unit by $10 a year over a 10-year period, at the end of those 10 years, if the market stays the same and we don't have any other crazy things going on, your complex property will increase in value by roughly $13 million. So the power of multifamily is insane what you can do. So how do you get started? Choosing a market. How do you choose a market? You want to make sure that your market, has population growth, employment, is income growing in there, is there a high crime rate? You can go to citydata.com and you can check out the crime rate over the past 10 years. Rule of thumb that you want to keep in mind is you want the crime for each year to be less than 500 reports. So this includes robberies, whatever, murders, all that kind of bad stuff. But make sure that there's less than 500 reported a year. You want to make sure that the median income is around 60 to 70 grand a year. And then you want to make sure that your property will be able to support the loan payment and all that. So you want to make sure that it cash flows. So how do you find the property? You're able to send mailers to the owners. You can pull lists from list stores, or you can make friends with escrow companies. Or speaking to real estate agents and brokers. They always have pocket listings and whatnot. You can also drive for dollars. You can drive around town, look for apartments or properties that maybe look kind of destroyed. Write down the address. And try to find these, do a reverse address lookup on True People Search to try to find out who owns the property. Typically, if you're looking for an apartment complex with 30 plus units, they're probably in an LLC. So you'll have to go to the state secretary's website, find out, enter the LLC's name, pull the articles and find out who owns the LLC. So you have to do a little bit digging around that. You can also cold call owners of properties, or you can cold call agents using a software that I've used before, Mojo Dialer. You basically just upload your list of phone numbers, names, and properties, and the dialer will just run through and cold call these people, and you can let them know what you're looking for. You can look on Craigslist, you can look at for sale by owner ads, or you can even message rental ads. So I've had some decent success recently with this, messaging people with rental ads on Facebook Marketplace, which has been super cool. Thank you. So evaluating a property. There's 4 types of properties, A, B, C, and D. You want to think of your A property as the best. Something like in Santana Row, right? That's like an A property, something that's built in within the previous 10 years. And then there's B, good area, recent build, blue collar workers. And then C, it's kind of an older complex. It has deferred maintenance. Maybe the paint's ugly, the yard's kind of ugly. And there's D, there's war zone properties. That's kind of something that you don't want to stay away from unless you have experience doing that. But typically, you're probably going to lose a lot of money if you go after that. Personally, I'm trying to target the C and B property, something that is a little bit worn down, that I can go in, clean up, increase the rent, and kind of take it over that way. When looking at properties, you want to look and make sure that they're roughly around 80% occupied. And if they're not, you want to try to figure out why. If the property is 100% occupied and it's like 100 or 200 unit, you might want to steer clear, or you might want to analyze it a little more, because how is that apartment complex 100% occupied? Typically, they'll probably, the rough number is around 90-95% occupancy in an apartment complex. So you want to make sure that the previous owner didn't try to give away free months of rent just to make it seem like it's full and get it sold for top dollar. When you're analyzing the financials on the property, typically the expenses should be around 50 to 45%. So your profit is roughly 50%. General guide of thumb. You also want to see if there's any fishy stuff going around, anything weird. I listen to a lot of real estate podcasts, and there's an example that somebody shared. He was looking at a property that had probably about 10 to 15 fire hydrants on the property, on the sidewalks and on the property. So when he saw it, right, and he was doing his analysis of the property, running his numbers, going through the units, making sure everything is okay, in his mind, he thought, oh, these fire hydrants are owned by the city, right? Who owns the fire hydrants? I don't know, the city, the fire department, who knows? As he's doing his due diligence, he went down to the city and asked them, hey, these fire hydrants are on my property. They mentioned that we might have to update the piping. When can you guys take a look or give me a quote on when you guys are going to do it? The city told him, no, those fire hydrants aren't our responsibility. They're your responsibility because they're on your property. Unfortunately, the guy was able to walk away from the property, but you can see how quick these little things that you might not pay attention to can cost you a lot of money. I think to fix and get all those fire hydrants checked was around $150,000. So that can be a huge hit to your property, once you take it over. Yeah, you also want to confirm market rents online when looking at the financials. The owner will give you, the income statement, balance sheet, and all that. Sometimes they'll try to fluff the numbers. You really want to do your due diligence and make sure that the market can support the rents that the property is currently rented for. Because once again, you don't know what the owner's telling these people, to get them in the door, offering, 50% off your first month, 6 months, that kind of thing. Yeah, when looking at the financials, you want to look at the taxes, insurance, utilities, the reserves to make sure it's a solid deal. So here's some important formulas. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but these are kind of like the 5 or 6 formulas that you definitely want to become familiar with. Going forward, maybe at our next meetup, I'll probably dive a little bit deeper through some of these formulas and kind of walk through as a team. Or if not, I'll probably do it on the podcast and walk through kind of analyzing the property. One rule of thumb that I like to use, roughly for every $1 million that you borrow, you're looking at roughly a $600 monthly payment. That's rough guideline. Just something to keep in mind when you're looking at properties, trying to evaluate the sale price and the cash flow that the property brings in. So financing the property, when you get into multifamily space, most properties, unless you're like looking in Detroit or Ohio, are $1 million plus, and they typically require at least a $30,000 or 30% down payment, and your net worth must exceed the property value. So how do you kind of get around that? You can look for owner financing, which is the best case scenario. I've heard of people finding apartment complexes or single family homes and working with the owner and having them owner finance the deal. Sometimes you can even get into the property with zero down, nothing out of your pocket. Anthony's smiling. He's probably done it or knows people who has. Everything's negotiable, the rate, the term, everything. So owner financing is the best case scenario. But if you can't find that, how do you pay for your down payment? You can pull from your savings if you have $250,000 plus. You can use equity in your home to pay for the down payment, or you can use a 401k. There's a special 401k that you can basically use as a checkbook, or you can draw from it and borrow for your investment purposes. So managing the property, once you take over the property, you got to figure out, will you pay a property management company to do it, or will you do it yourself? Me personally, when I find my property, I plan on managing it myself. I want to really learn everything, the ins and outs, get my hands dirty, and really get those numbers tight. So buying your first property, you can follow the steps outlined, or you can invest in a real estate syndication, which I'm sure Anthony will talk about in a bit. Basically, it's where you pool money of investors. Usually it's a $50,000 minimum buy-in, and you try to raise the down payment that way. Everything is drafted by a real estate attorney. Typical hold time is around 5 years, but it depends on the deal. So each month you'll basically receive mailbox money. You'll receive a check, a return on your investment, month or quarterly or yearly, depending on how they work out the deal. So here's my goals. My goal, obviously, I told you, I'm looking for a property, a 2 to 30 unit multifamily property by July. Raise private money for the purchase, evaluate, close the property, and this is my plan on what I'm going to do. Rehab the units as the tenants move out, update the counters, cabinets, basically do a full gut job, increase the rent, reduce the expenses. One thing that you might want to look at is your contract with the utility company. The contract with the utility company could be an outdated contract, so you're paying higher electrical fees. So definitely get with the utility company, have them work out a good rate for you, and that can help you save. There's a bunch of little things that you can do. Like I said, charge for parking, charge for storage. You can put on storage units on the property, charge for cable, internet, maybe add in a child care facility. I've heard of people doing that as well. Also increase security on the property, cameras, parking lots, something like that, just to make its family safe. So here's a little bit of information about us, how you can contact us. Once again, please check out my podcast. And obviously, I hope you got some good nuggets, but obviously I can't teach you how to buy your first apartment complex in 15 minutes. It's really, a long-term commitment, reading books, listening to podcasts, networking, getting a coach. But I hope that I was able to jog your mind a bit, get your minds thinking that way. But if you continue to come to this meetup, I'll continue to provide value, show you what I'm doing with mailers, finding properties, analyzing properties, and continue to bring in good guests like Anthony, which we'll move to next. So, yeah.